Hey, this is Mithy and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Now, the reason why I chose to make this video, not just a historical overview where I give you some context on someone's run and how good it was, but actually one of my narrative mechanic episodes, is because there's this sense surrounding Mad Lions, and when he used to be their head coach, Mac, that Mad Lions are just international chokers who've never gotten it done. They just bomb every time. And so the Mac guy, obviously, must just be full of shit, right? All of his philosophy must just be a bunch of flowery words or lovely utopian ideas that don't work in reality. But in doing so, yes, certainly they've had some really big failures, but you'd be ignoring what actually is one of the better runs that any Western team has had in a single calendar year of League of Legends. So yes, obviously Mad Lions had some epic failures. In that 2020 year when they became Mad Lions, the team used to be called Splice before, and Peter Dunn was like directing the project, but Mac was there as like a strategic coach. Famously, they went into the play-ins of the tournament after being one of the top 3 LEC teams. And what happened in the play-ins? Oh, that's right. They managed to lose in 5 games to Supermassive, who actually did have Armour, who joined the team the next year. Then in 2022, if we skip forward a couple of years, obviously in LEC, famously, they didn't win a single playoff series, but they made it to Worlds. And you just looked at that and you're like, what? You made it to Worlds, winning a series, and then what happened at Worlds? Oh, that's right. In another plane, they got banged out. This time, they just got swept 3-0 by evil geniuses, including former coach Peter Dunn. So really embarrassing stuff again after you've already been in a position where you're one of the top teams. Then you go to last year, MSI, they flunked it hard, didn't do anything relevant. 2023 Worlds, they were just another irrelevant team. They weren't really a team you expected to go 0-3. They weren't a team that you expected to have a chance to make it to the top 8. So the splashback onto Mac and Mad Lions in general has been huge. Now, I know obviously now Mad Lions is a Spanish org and nobody really cares anymore. It's about Spanish players and a totally different set of players. There's only El Yoya remaining. But this 2021 run that they had is legitimately one of the better runs of any Western team in history in the era of MSI and Worlds that we've ever had. Like, you have to realize at the 2 big international tournaments, MSI and Worlds, they were eliminated in series play, best of 5 play, by a top 2 team, Damwon, at each of the tournaments. They were in the final both times, and actually the team that was supposed to be, at this point, they were prepping to be potentially the best team of all time. People don't know, Damwon's only match losses that year were RNG loss at MSI final, and then the EDG Worlds loss in the final there. So basically, they were incredibly close themselves to doing like a Golden Road Grand Slam type scenario, and a lot of people were saying Canyon and Showmaker, like, it's just the greatest jungle mid-duo of all time. That's the only team that beat them in series play, guys. So let's go and let's look at this 2021 run, because it's actually epic. So as you can see, yeah, we all remember back in the day when they came along, and in 2020 they started going, but that was the online year because if you know what, and there was a lot of other circumstances where it didn't look like they had the same pressure as other people did when it was a proper playoff match, etc. Had a little bit more of the online field. But then you came to 2021, and famously they brought in Armour, who'd been the top player of the aforementioned notorious Supermassive who beat them at Worlds, and they got an El Yoya because Shadow, who was a stud Lee Sin player, chose to not return with the team. They chose not to keep him like a Romeo, the top laner, and he obviously ended up playing in the LPL if people don't know. They got in El Yoya, who people said was a talent, and obviously turned out to be mega. They still had Humanoid, they still had Kazi, and they still had Kaiser, and they still had Mac, but obviously at this point in time, Peter Dunn has moved on, because at this point he already goes over to Evil Geniuses. So in this year, this was where, in both the splits, they're just chilling. They're really good, but they're still just chilling. They're not like dominant in the normal splits, but then they go in the playoffs, God mode. They obviously win the spring one after a mad reverse sweep of Rogue, and then go to MSI, make top 4 there. Then in summer, again, they're just chilling, but they go to the playoffs. They managed to do an epic run where this time they just come through the upper bracket and they just win straight up, just beat everyone who's good, even 3-0 Rogue in this one instead of the 3-2 from spring. Go to Worlds and make top 8 there. This is a very good year. You've won 2 domestic championships. You're in the semis of MSI, which is the minimum you'd want from a top Western team. And then you've made top 8 at Worlds, and you lost to the team that actually at the time were the odds-on favourite to win. Everyone thought Damwon was going to win that particular Worlds. So now let's go look at some of these results. When you go to MSI, you'll find that when you go up here, obviously you had to start in the stage 1 was when it was like little groups with all the bad players and teams and everyone, right? So they were in the 1. Then actually, if you look at them, like, yeah, this is actually one where it's not impossible you could get some upset losses, right? PSG talent, PCS was always decent, at least. And obviously, this one, they were amazing, with the Doggo guy stood in. And then you had, like, Pain Gaming. Look, CBLOL doesn't tend to do much historically, but they could be good for a single loss, right? And then obviously wildcard regions, specifically Turkey. I mean, Mad Lions themselves know what that's all about. So actually, they managed to win the group 5-1. They lose one game to the Turkish team, as is tradition, I guess, in this time. And then aside from that, they're able to 2-0 Pain, 2-0 PSG Talon, who ends up coming top 4 themselves, not Cloud9. So, okay, easily taken care of the first group there. You go into the Rumble when they put all the teams in one group, and you'll see here they just sneak into the playoffs with a 5-5 record. It's not so crazy, right? Because they go 1-1 against Cloud9. Now, this was the same Cloud9 that beat Damwon, by the way. So they had perks, they had blah, blah. They were capable of doing some crazy stuff every now and then. They just couldn't consistently sustain it. So 1-1 against them is not like a massive diss to you as a team. Going 0-2 against Damwon, no surprise. Considered the best team in the world at the time. They've just won LCK Spring. You go over, and obviously they with a different bot lane, they'd won Worlds and were the reigning world champion. Then you go over and against Pentanet, which was the team from Oceanic region. They easily 2-0 them, like whatever. You go to PSG Talon, the team that you lost a game against before. Did you actually lose to them? No, you 2-0'd them in the other one. You 1-1 them at this point in time. Okay, losing them, it's not that great, but as you saw, they actually were pretty epic themselves when they got to the playoffs, right? Then on the last one against RNG, you go 1-1, you win a game off RNG, the eventual champions of the tournament. So, okay, that's all right. Look, there's some not so great results. There's some good results. You are actually winning against RNG, for example. So then you go to the playoffs, and they get the hardest draw because they're the 4th seed. You should get the best team. So obviously RNG playing Talon, that's at least there's a chance Talon could win that. On paper, Mad Lions is supposed to have no chance against Damwon. You're supposed to get absolutely murked, but it's a 3-2. And it's worse than that, guys. Because if you remember this one, this is the one where Damwon wins the first game. Interesting little comp there, isn't it? Oh, Rumble Jungle. Isn't that the one that Freak said it wasn't even that good? So Rumble Jungle was obviously cracked at the time. This is great. But then Mad Lions comes right back. Notice there's a lot of teams winning on this side. Mad Lions comes right back. Arm Up plays Lee Sin top. That's right, actually for real. And they win this game. It's an epic game that they win. They go 1-1. Then they take a lead in the series. They actually managed to win. They got an Uday pick for El Yoy at this point in time. Mega player, but that was just a meta champion at the time. Against, they beat a Canyon Rumble Jungle. They go 2-1, so they're up 2-1. And then obviously Damwon's amazing, so Damwon comes back, and this is a strong game. But the problem is, this 5th game, look at the game, guys. Like, this is a game for real where in draft there were many options they could have done. Supposedly Max says he had like a sort of like Exodia type Yu-Gi-Oh draft where he could have done his trap card but he didn't have the balls and he went a bit safer. You watch the game itself, it's not even a game that they just completely smashed in. Like, this was a winnable series. There's a world where this team makes it to the final, and look, I would imagine they'd lose to RNG, but even if they did, like, you'd have made it top 2 of an international tournament. Not that many Western teams make the MSI final, obviously not going through Koreans. Obviously G2 did it previously, but who else does it against Koreans? You go to Worlds, this is another mad slept on one, because if you ever go and look, in a way this is the group of death. Because you could actually make a case that, except maybe Team Liquid, who people wouldn't be that big a fan of because they're from LCS. Bear in mind, Mad Lions is the #1 European team and the 2 times champion of Europe. They're actually a team where, if you look, this is a group where you can argue these 3 teams all on paper deserve or could be expected to get out, but only 2 of them can. And then Team Liquid, if you're going to put them as your 4th best team in the group, is way too good to be the 4th best team. So you look at this, it's actually a very hard group. Like, this is one where Gen.G, if you remember, BDD was cracked at this one. He was playing really insane. I think they were in the spring finals as well. Obviously, LNG, this wasn't the one that had Scout. That was later on. This was the one that had Icon as the middle, but you had Tarzan, who looked really good in the LPL. You had Light, who obviously later was on Weibo, was pretty good at this point in time. Like, you had Arle. This is when he was coming into his own as a top laner and starting to show his skills. This was a dangerous team too. That's why they're at Worlds instead of a rookie team, for example. And then Team Liquid themselves, remember, is the one with Jensen and Alfari, and these guys were, and Core JJ, and these guys were murking the LCS. And yeah, they weren't always the champion, but they were a very good team. They were certainly an excellent team. And obviously, they had that whole thing with Jat had to be fired after my video. And so they didn't even really have a proper coach in that sense. They had called the former jungler, used to call Trashy from Splice, who was doing the coaching at this point in time. So in this group, you'd be totally, it wouldn't even be the end of the world if you came 3rd and then LNG and Gen.G made out. Or Team Liquid has an inspired run. So actually what ends up happening is you go 1-1 against every team, like everyone in the group did. So you go 1-1 against Gen.G, okay. You go 1-1 against LNG. and you go 1-1 against Team Liquid, which causes a tiebreaker scenario for everyone. And in the tiebreakers, you beat LNG, an LPL team, so you're now 2-1 against one of the LPL teams, by the way. And then in the final, you lose to Gen.G, but like I say, BDD, like the joke is he was like an MVP candidate for this Worlds. He was cracked out of his mind. So it's not even a shame to lose to them. So essentially you get to come second in your group overall after the tiebreakers. You go to the playoffs, right? Think about this. You're coming second at this point in time. So there's two angles I want to raise here. One, you are one single BO1 at any point. If you win a single BO1 extra, you come first in the group. So if it's in the actual group stage itself, if you'd even beaten Team Liquid one more time, and that was a close game, then you would have been top of the group and you would actually come out first. And if you came out first, you would have played either Hanwha Life, which was the Chovy one, if people don't remember, not this one that they're showing now, obviously, it shows the modern roster. It was the one that had Chovy on, and basically he was hard carrying them. So like, you'd have even had a chance to potentially beat them. They weren't a great team. You could have had EDG, who ends up winning Worlds. Okay, that would be pretty hard. They obviously end up being very good in the playoff bracket. Or you could have had Cloud9, who, it was something of a fluke. They made it out of a sort of group of death as well, right? So there's a world where Mad Lions could have played Cloud9, who it does look, quite frankly, they would have beaten a best of 5. And then they would have been in the semis. And they would have been against EDG in the semi-finals if they won one more game, either in the regular portion of this, or if they just win this one here. If they win this one single game there, or, you know, Team Liquid wins that game and then they beat Team Liquid. One game could have made their whole bracket different. But instead, they come second out of a tough group, right? So what's their reward? Remember, you can only play the other first place teams. So you could have played RNG. Okay, that'd be pretty tough. They were the MSI champions. Tough team, right? You could have played T1. That's pretty rough too, right? They ended up, especially by the end of this tournament, showing they were the second best Korean team. They were better than Hanwha. They weren't quite as good as Damwon. It's obviously a world where they could have been in the final. It was 5 games. This is, remember, when they still had Kana instead of bringing Zays in. But the rest of the lineup was the people that now play in T1 and won in 2023. Or you could get Damwon, the 2 times champions of the LCK, and they only lost that MSI thanks to some Smurf performances on RNG. So actually the worst team you can draw right now, if you're second place from this group, is Damwon. And of course they draw them immediately. One of the only teams that's almost certain to beat you. And Damwon does indeed 3-0 them. And look very, very good. Like, what do you expect at that point in time? Meanwhile, you could have been in this position of Gen.G, beat Cloud9, I think that would happen. And then in the semis, play EDG. It'd be a very interesting game, I'll say that much. I'd certainly love to see that one and see what happens in that scenario, right? I mean, there's a world where obviously RNG could have won, you could have played them too. So if you actually go and look at this, like, what are we even hating on them for? Oh, and by the way, I'll just throw this last detail in there as well. If you don't remember that round of 8 series, because I've got a pretty good memory for these things, I'm almost certain like game 1 was even like a close game, and then it was just after that that it all went to shit. Like, I'm actually pretty sure if we go and look, that game 1, yeah, this is the one I think where you actually do get like a game going, or is it another one at this point in time? Oh no, I'm thinking of game 2. Here, look at how much play there is in game 2. Look at the gold, look at the amount of time, look at the amount of kills. In fact, even in game 3, like, you're not totally on it. There's like 2 out of the 3 games here. You're even like in with a chance. Like, they were actually playing quite high-level league. Like, if you ever go watch these matches, the semi-final against Damwon MSI, or this quarterfinals, you'll be impressed by how good Mad Lions was. Like, they were a team that could like make these interesting mid-game moves. Like, the mixture of Humanoid Kazi seemed to work well in terms of shot calling. Obviously, they were great at fighting their way back into games from behind. Like, this was a cool team. They had the Mac element where you could draft, even if Ahmed was a bit of a joke, then you had like, obviously the joke was him and Kaiser could play like the Wukong, and you had these weird like flexes you could do. Elyoya was coming in his own as a mega rookie. Like, this was actually a really good team. And sadly, because they didn't win or make like a final of the international tournaments, people act like they did nothing. And in fact, they then just forget and retcon this year and make like it was only the failures of 2020, 2022, 2023. No. 2021 was legit. So put some respect on Mad Lions' name, boys. Events come and go, fame rises and then falls away. You have a job, you lose a job. You do one thing, you have to move on to another. But one of the cool things about my career is I have my own support network who's always got my back. So I always know I can rely on support to do the work I want to do and talk the way I want to talk and not have to follow certain rules that others arbitrarily have to follow. And that support group is, of course, called the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community. This video and all the others on my channel was kindly supported by Pugnatio Rajcula, Frisky, Ahmed Hadjou, Tobias Bernasconi, Torin, Tosh, Jensen Goh, Animosity, and you know it, always my main man Jerky's minion, rocking with me, ride or die. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for a future episode of Reflections or a talk show? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA, where I tend to go quite in depth, or perhaps you want to take part in one of those really long donated discussions where we talk about whatever you're into in esports. Well, if any of those perks or any of the others catch your fancy, join the Skilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box where? Down below.